take a walk with me, not like you used to do. Do something different and put yourself in other people's shoes. Open up your mind and open up your eyes and change your direction, change your perspective.
Welcome into Other People's Shoes. As you know, I am your host, Neil Matthews. Thank you so much for joining us today. By the way, I know we are in the month of generosity. We are in the month of giving thanks, right? Thanksgiving is just around the corner. Want to know a way you can thank the show? Just really fast, you can do two things. One way you can thank the show, jump on over right now to your favorite social media of the choice, whether that be Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Give us a like there, give us a follow there, send us a message there. We would love that if you want to do that. And of course, you can also jump right over to opspodcast.com. You can leave a review there. You can even send me a voicemail there. You can even send feedback there. Whichever you want to do, I, of course, being the month of Thanksgiving, would be thankful and grateful for that. Speaking of things that I'm thankful and grateful for, I don't know about anybody else, but it's not every day when you meet somebody, whether it be at work, at the coffee shop, maybe it's a sporting event. Yeah, we have those again, by the way. Whatever it may be, you encounter that individual that you think, man, I want to know more about them. I want to know more about their story. Well, that's exactly what happened for me with today's guest. Let me introduce you to him right now. In fact, he actually wrote this introduction. This is not my words. These are his words. He's an aging former punk rock icon. He's an egomaniac with an inferiority complex. He's a lackluster husband, but he's above average father. He's passionate about curiosity, and he would also categorize himself as this: Dopeless hope fiend. If he were rich, he'd probably call himself eccentric, but since he's not, you can just call me weird. So help me welcome him in, Steven Yetter. Steven, how are you today?
I'm phenomenal. How you doing, Neil?
You know, I try to always say I'm better than I deserve, but even that, I think, sometimes seems, like you said, maybe a little egocentric, maybe a little, inferiority complex, maybe a little fake.
It fits the topic.
It does, though. It does have, however, it does fit the topic. So that's very good. So yeah, I'm just excited to sit with you. It's going to be a great conversation. I feel like since I started interacting with you, I just immediately was like, this is a guy I got to get. This is a guy I got to go after.
Well, I'm honored.
Just again, happy that you're here today. I feel like the more we got to know each other, the more I felt like, we were kind of cut from the same cloth and maybe separated at birth, which my wife and daughter have been watching this show, Switched at Birth, which has a whole nother dynamic to that. Maybe you're my long lost, second removed brother in some respects. I don't know. Maybe we were twins and our real mom's been looking for us all along. No, I'm kidding, Mom. I love you.
Probably. Man, what a trip that would be, right?
Steven, again, just excited that you're here today. So help me with this. What size shoes do you wear?
10 and a half, depending on the brand. Chuck Taylor's like 9.5, actually, because those run a little bit big. But I don't wear those so much. Not anymore. Not since I grew up. I can't say that with a straight face. It's rad to see you in your elements.
Is it?
Yeah. I hope you don't mind me saying so, but yeah, it seems like this is awesome to see what you're passionate about.
So if we're in Chuck Taylor's, what'd you say, 9.5?
I think so.
Okay, so that's interesting though. So 10 also is kind of 10 and a half, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned style or brand. Obviously, it depends on that. So that's my next question: is what style or brand do you prefer, maybe more than another?
It's hard for me to find that shoe that I just love. I've got a set of Pumas that I've just literally ran into the ground. They're not your classic style Puma. They're like the old school kind of. They've got the tan heel. They look like kind of a Vans knockoff, if you will. I don't know which came first, the Puma or the Van. I love Vans too, but yeah, that's kind of my go-to if I'm lounging because of our nature of work. I'm dressing to the nines as much as I can. So Cole Haans if I'm on the clock, or I think I've got Steve Madden's on today or something I got, Mervin's on the rack for, last year's series or what have you, right? Baller on a budget.
I like that. Baller on a budget. All right. So for settling on a brand, which would you pick? Like, again, this is your shoes. We want to make sure we're in the right style and brand. So settling on a brand.
Because of variety available, I would probably say Vans.
Okay.
Just because there's so much and they're so customizable.
Gotcha.
But I'm like a hardcore believer in the underdog, but I don't know if it's just regional and, Pumas maybe bigger somewhere else. But I love Pumas just because I almost feel like I'm like more cultured wearing them, it's not what everybody wears. Like I'm from Santa Cruz. Everybody wears like Vans, Chuck Taylors. It's like, you'll see 50 of them on the street, but it's like not everybody's wearing Pumas. And so it's like, it's an opportunity for me to kind of stand out, I feel.
Let's go with the Pumas.
I'm going to make my own shoes.
There you go.
What I'm gonna do.
Yeah, make your own shoes. All right, so getting into this question that everyone has been, some say forced, some say challenged, some say, oh, you're going to ask it again, like I know it's coming. Okay, cool. Some have even said, wow, that's too broad. Some have said, that question makes me cry. Some have even cried when they've heard that question. Not making fun of tears. I never knew starting out this season that this question was going to invoke so much emotion for people. And it really is this question, am I enough? And so I pose it to you, my friend, Steven. Has there ever been a moment in your life where you really sat down and stopped and said, or maybe even along the way, there was no stopping. It just, kept going in those Pumas and in those Vans. The boardwalk in Santa Cruz. I don't know.
Again, I don't want to answer a really broad question with a really broad answer. I would say often. It has come up quite a bit in my life, I would say. Part of me wants to say, like my ego wants to say that's what drives me. That's what motivates me. It's like I want to try harder and achieve more and do better and have a growth mindset and all that jazz, which I do. That's all true. If I'm honest with myself, it really does stem from, like I said, egomaniac with an inferiority complex. Life often to me feels like performance art. And let me explain. I'm a learned extrovert. So when I grew up, I was really shy. I was really introverted. And I think at my core, there's a lot of me that is still that individual. And I've learned interacting with people. It makes me sound like a sociopath, but it's like, showing them what they want to see makes me feel like I'm relevant more in their world than my own, if that makes sense.
I think it does. First off, if it makes sense to you, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
I mean, really. Because I don't know the right answer to that question. I had a lady say, well, I hope, people say quite often, I hope that answered your question. Like, I don't know if it answered it. I never know how to respond to that. I'm like, well, I think it did. I don't know. I wasn't necessarily looking for the right answer.
Of course. Yeah.
But to your point, when I hear that, I almost hear, and help me with this even maybe, is I almost hear an idea or a thought process of almost like having to perform, like there's this, not fakeness to you per se. I know there's the classic line, right? Fake it till you make it. But I hear a little bit of that in that answer. Is that true of you?
I understand exactly what you're saying because, saying it out loud or even thinking about it, it does feel, if you're performing and you're putting on a show or you're interacting with somebody trying to get to their level or at their level or speak their language, if you will. You and I have been in sales a long time. And so we're trained to kind of mirror the person that we're interacting with. And it's, in itself, that's artificial, but we know we get results that way. And I feel like that's applicable to more than just what we do for a living. I feel like if you want to interact with individuals, mirroring their body language and doing different things to try to get connected to them on, can help them open up or feel more comfortable. Jump off the diving board and into the deep water. I think a big part of it too stems from my own mental illness, if you will. I don't even like that expression, but when I was younger, I was diagnosed as manic depressive, which they now call bipolar. And so that's something that I try to maintain, I guess. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, be aware of. It's an expression that gets thrown around a lot. And I don't think people really grasp what it means. It doesn't mean that I have dramatic mood swings, although that can be true. Sometimes something will stick for a while. It tends to be like a chunk of time. It could last months, high highs, low lows. And someone like myself who, I'm always craving instant gratification. I think that's pretty common, but you don't want the highs to go away. You don't want that happiness to disappear. And so sometimes you'll put on a show, so to speak, so that you can kind of maintain it and keep it going. And it's harder to get vulnerable and be your authentic, real self with individuals sometimes, especially when you don't think that they're going to want to hear what you have to say if you get to that level of honesty with them. And so in a lot of ways, I feel like the showmanship, whether I'm just amplifying an authentic feeling or really in a dark place inside myself, but putting on a show because I feel like that's better than the alternative.
First off, thanks for being vulnerable enough to share that. I want to acknowledge that.
Thank you.
That's a hard thing. I have not met too many people who have openly admitted that they have that diagnosis. And I do think for myself, I don't know enough about that challenge. Those that are, identifying or been diagnosed with, I know that's a hot button. I identify as, whatever. And I'm not trying to be flippant there. I'm just saying there are those that do that.
No, and I hear what you're saying. I mean, what's kind of fascinating about a lot of different mental illnesses or disorders and things of that nature is that they paint with a broad brush, and there's things that are applicable that I think anybody can relate to. And what's really great about, I suppose, this day and age is that it seems like it's being taken much more serious, getting a lot more publicity. It doesn't seem like it's something that people have to be ashamed of or dismiss or hide in the closet, so to speak. And I think that the more people can understand and wrap their head around, it'll make it to where people may be more welcome or comfortable becoming vulnerable, and there won't be such a stigma behind it, I suppose.
To me, it seems like when I have spoken to those individuals again who have said, hey, I have this is a thing. It seems like, and I'm going to go broad and then shrink it back to you, but it seems like when I've interacted with them, there is this internal struggle. There is this constant battle. Is that true of you? You mentioned always trying to stay, kind of in that happy state. Now, have you had any help in that regard? Have you had any like medication, or is there, I know those that have done drugs to try to stay there. I mean, help me with that if you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. Well, and I have been that person, thankfully I was able to get out of that lifestyle, in this, November, I will have been, knock wood, no fronts, I should say. That'll be 11 years for me on the 21st, clean and sober, which was something that I can't take credit for. I was in a place where I needed help. I was able to have the gift of desperation where help was needed, and I went after it and took it, and it changed my life. Who I was 11 years ago is night and day different than who I am today. To your question though, the interesting thing about at least my experience with this is that, and I hate to use the word disease, but it's a disease that tells you don't have a disease. Like, I'm constantly at odds with myself, convincing myself that I don't need to be on medication, convincing myself that I can do this on my own, and ultimately I hope to get to that place someday. I think that at least for me, pharmaceuticals and medications, they're a bridge to help you get to a place where you can connect with a therapist who might be able to get you to a place where you don't need them. That's my ultimate, I suppose, goal, if you will. There's still just a lot more work to do. To your point, I feel like I'm constantly at odds with myself, and there's a gravitational pull that I have to be conscious of, that going both directions, of the extreme highs and the extreme lows. I have to be aware of it. It's almost like observing yourself. If I can pause for a second and say, holy smokes, I'm like talking 50 miles a minute, and I can tell that I'm, alienating the people that I'm engaging with. Maybe I'm a little manic. And the same is true for the extreme depression. Seeing the edge of that sinkhole and knowing where it is and how to kind of stay clear of it. For me, it was supplemental. This kind of ties into your question, I think, is that, music played a really huge part in having an outlet and having somewhere to funnel that energy. The downside is, because of my addictive behavior, it felt like anytime I wasn't playing music, I was miserable. I was just waiting for the next time I got to play music again. And so I have to remind myself to be grateful. And I think that's really key is there's two things that I think that are extremely important for me to remain focused on is acceptance and gratitude.
Well, you mentioned a couple of things which really stood out to me that I really am curious about. The first thing is you were talking about how this gift of desperation, I think is what you called it. And for me, when I heard that, I'm like, man, what does that mean to you? The gift of desperation.
In short, in simple terms, a bottom. I'm the type of person that will take something as far as I possibly can. I hit a place where it's like I knew the road that I was on was going to lead to jails, institutions, or death, and I had to do something. And so for me, I'm thankful for having that opportunity to hit my bottom and recognize it, get out of it. What I could do a better job of would be helping others.
There's a point, I think, for me at least, and maybe this is true of you, and again, you can speak to it, but I think there is a point in time where you finally say, okay, I figured out how to get out of this, whatever, and we'll air quote, whatever this is, and now I want to make sure everyone else, one, doesn't go down this road, and two, if they do go down this road, because maybe stupidity, curiosity, maybe thrill, whatever it may be, comes into play, I'm going to make sure if they do get down this road, that I'm standing there almost as the crossing guard saying, no, don't go any further. I promise you, this doesn't lead anywhere.
The struggle there is that people have to find it on their own. People are rarely convinced against their own will to do something, even if it's going to better the situation. It's almost as if they need to find it. Just to share my own examples, like just maybe painting with a broader brush, this is why, unfortunately, the success rate of interventions is so low, because most individuals, myself included, needed to get there on their own.
Was there anybody that kind of had that proverbial lifesaver for you? Not the candy, but you know what I mean? Like
yeah, it was my father.
Your father? Okay.
Yeah.
And how did he play a role in that?
Our relationship was tense when I was younger, but as I've gotten older, I've more and more seen him as a mentor. And it was one of those moments where I remember it vividly as he just said, "I'm worried." And it hit me. It kind of was like he'd probably said it hundreds of times before, but this was the time when I was ready to hear it, where I had kind of gotten low enough to a point where it's like I was willing to do whatever it took to change the course that I was on. It was one of those things, you and I have talked about it before, is like being in the right moment, where it's like if you're in harmony with the universe, when you extend your hand, a piece of fruit will fall into it. This is kind of the opposite of a piece of fruit. It was like a kick in the ass happened at the right moment from somebody that I cared about. And he wasn't angry. He was visibly concerned. And at that point in time in my life, I was in a dark place. There was a lot of reasons for me to keep going on the path that I was. It was easy for me to make an excuse and say anybody would drink or use in my situation. My brother had passed away from cancer. My mother had gotten diagnosed with cancer like 6 months after my brother died. And so I was literally just welcoming death at that point, I think, or anything to escape where I was at that time. And I think he recognized that. And so that's why what he said, as simple as it was, kind of rang through and it got through to me.
Does he know that one word, gesture, whatever you want to say, moment, does he know about how much that was the catalyst perhaps that really kind of pushed you back on the trajectory of where you want to be now?
Yeah, he does. He does. I've shared that with him, and he's walked with me through some tough times sober. Our relationship has definitely gotten stronger from that moment on. And I know that if I were to pick up everything that I have would be gone in a flash, because I've done that before.
It's great that you've let him know that before. I say so often that, and again, I know I don't ever like to talk in the we's or the generals, but I will say, I know for myself, I have tried to make it my purpose now in life that when somebody pops into my head or somebody, comes across my path, I try to be that voice of encouragement, that if they need it, if I see somebody down that I know, well, not some random stranger on Main Street, I'm like, hey, you matter. Let's go. That feels very fake. FOMO or, fear. I know that's fear of missing out, but I don't want them to miss out on that moment. But I've made it my purpose of late to really, when I see another man that is in my life, if they're down, to say, hey man, you find something encouraging to share with them. So anyway, that's good stuff before it's too late. 'Cause you never know. You just never know. You also mentioned in that you remind yourself to be grateful, kind of building on what I was saying. But I'm wondering how that is the kind of the juxtaposition of, hey, remind myself to be grateful. And then you talk about being this, kind of lackluster husband, but above average father. So how do those two worlds kind of collide?
Self-deprecation is probably my favorite form of humor. It's half joking that I say I'm a lackluster husband and above average father, but also there's half of that I think is true. I think I don't really know how to be functional in a relationship. Like I remember you sharing with me a milestone of your of your marriage and your relationship. And I was like, yeah, man, I'm lucky if I can make a relationship last that many minutes, just because I think that anybody who spends a substantial amount of time with me finds me disagreeable. My wife is no exception. There's only two things I have any control of in this world, and that's my choices and my attitude. If I really mean what I say by that, then what could I do differently? It ties into wanting the things that I do or the sacrifices I make to matter. And I think there's so many ways in society these days where it's easier to take things for granted. I'm trying to think of the way to put it, but it's like, these aren't things that should be appreciated. They're just expected, I guess. And so that's, I think, one of the things that I struggle with is that I look at a lot of things that I think are contributing to, my marriage or my relationship as, shouldn't this matter, or shouldn't this be perceived as love? And then it's not. I think part of that has to do with, if you don't know what can cause somebody's suffering, this is almost like a Buddhist thing. If you don't know what can cause somebody's suffering, then the very act of loving them can cause more suffering, because you're not, perfect example is your show. You're not putting yourself in their shoes, which comes into compassion. You have to learn, what it is that causes that individual to suffer, which I suppose is I look at the conundrum of like, okay, then you're changing the way you love to fit somebody else, which is something that I have a hard time with. I think all of us want to be loved for who we are. Ultimately, we have to make compromises for those that we love, so to speak. I don't know. I'm not a love guru at all.
I'm wondering about this though. Is Stephen able to be loved and receive love?
That's a good question. Does Stephen believe he deserves love?
So how would you answer that?
I think I have a damaged viewpoint of what love is. Maybe damaged is the wrong word.
Where does that come from though?
Going back to the beginning is, the dynamic in my family was, and I love my family, don't get me wrong. My family growing up was very tight, and it was very, my mom really was kind of the glue that was holding everybody together. A large degree looking back of codependency, where it was, I've heard it said, and this just kind of resonated with me, is you didn't quite know how to be loved, so you settle for being needed. That more than anything, I think, kind of clicks with your question of like, do I really know how to be? And then therefore, do I really know how to appropriately give love? And is that why I feel like, am I enough just by saying I'm a lackluster husband? Obviously don't feel that way.
That's a tough one, right? It's a tough question to try to answer, but I think it builds into what you sent us. We always ask these 10 questions before somebody comes on, and one of the questions we always ask, which I just absolutely love. I think it's incredible to me because I always get to know a little deeper of somebody. As for a quote or a saying or something that resonates with them, you gave us a few. I'd have to go back in the archives and look. It might be the most. I don't know. It seemed like there was a lot, but one that really stuck to me, and I don't know if you purposely did this. I don't know. But it was your very number one. So to me, it was top of mind. That's my analyzing FSET answer. So anyway, here it goes. It says, you only live once, but if you do it right, once is enough. Like, why on earth that? Of all the sayings, all the quotes, I mean, you gave us a lot. Why that one of all?
How I interpret that, and maybe here's a better quote, because I don't even know who said that one originally. Mark Twain said that, if you steal from one person, it's plagiarism, but if you steal from everyone, it's genius. And so I didn't even know who I butchered that from. To maybe say that quote a different way. Here's how it resonates with me. Steve McQueen said it, and I love this. He said, attack life. It's going to kill you anyway. At the end of the day, just go for it, I guess. Maybe that's what it means to me. I've shared this with you before when we've talked, is like, if I'm on my deathbed, am I going to remember that I got to see every season of Jersey Shore? Am I going to think about the chances I didn't take? That's what everybody says, reflecting back on their lives. So do it, go for it, live fast, die young, leave a good looking corpse, right? Who said that? I don't know. I love quotes. Everybody's looking through life through their own lens, right? And so when I say a quote, you're interpreting it through the lens of your upbringing and your culture and your family dynamics growing up. And same thing with me, is like, you say something and I'll interpret it a certain way. And so I'm fascinated by things like that. I'm fascinated by, what was somebody thinking at the moment that they said it.
Yeah, same. And I think that's why I'm always on the hunt for like the next kind of quote. Cause I think for me, a quote can bring inspiration. A quote can bring, a different perspective. on life. And I think that's why, I too am fascinated by the quote. That's why I always leave that question on there, because to me, it gives another layer to someone in my mind. So there we are.
It wasn't as dark as I was going to go, if that makes you feel better, even though it's a dark one, but
you can go dark. I mean, it's fine. I guess that's what I was wondering about, that when you read something, when you hear something, when you are in an event or an environment, whatever, is there for you this internal struggle that, hey, this is kind of a public setting, like I'm not at home kicking it, with your family. Is there this pressure almost that you have to be kind of up, that you have to be happy, that you have to be this gregarious, fun-loving guy? You have to be on the stage. Like, that's the stage. And then at home is almost like backstage.
What's interesting is I'm almost more comfortable being that showman, if you will. People talk about fear of public speaking and things like that. And I love the thrill of that kind of thing, getting out there and being a hyped man, if you will. That's where I feel kind of in my element, even though you're right in a sense that there's some times when I'm just not feeling it. Today, for example, so I haven't been sleeping. I can function on little to no sleep, which is terrifying when I really think about it. So sometimes, for example, like, I'm running on about an hour of sleep today. I've got to go to work. I've got to go perform, and so today will definitely feel artificial probably. But I would say that part of me feels natural in that environment. It's hard to explain it, taking a hard left turn here, but it's like Jay Leno talked about, when he was first starting out as a comic, what he was really known for was kind of like bantering with the crowd and engaging with individuals in the audience that he had never met before or seen before, anything like that. And the way he practiced this was he would, while he's going through his normal kind of pre-rehearsed skit, if you will, he would be analyzing like different people in the audience, completely thinking separately. So he's almost like on autopilot. He's doing his jokes and he's got his shtick and he's doing his thing out on the stage and he's not missing a beat. Simultaneously, he's fixated on an individual in the crowd and their brown jacket and how that jacket looks like it's from, 1970s polo competition or whatever. And he's going to bring that up. And that's, and then he pivots and without skipping a beat can do that. And so for me, that's kind of how it feels. It feels like I could go out today, perform, probably be thinking about something completely different inside of my mind. I could be fantasizing about Hawaii while having a full-blown conversation with somebody. And I'm sure everybody can to some extent, but it's just is artificial. It does feel sometimes like I have to put on that show, like I have to be up, I have to perform.
But I just wonder, is there ever a danger in that? Almost somebody finding out, we talked, obviously a lot.
Yeah.
One of the things we did talk about was, David Copperfield and magic. And I think you like magic and I like magic, and which is weird because we're always trying to figure out the trick maybe. But is there a danger in, if somebody comes along and who knows you authentically and says you're being fake, you're almost a fraud, and it's not your intention to necessarily deceive, but it's almost like a shell for you to just keep others away from knowing the real you, the intimate you? Well,
and that's a very provocative question because it boils down to trust. Like, who do you trust well enough to let inside that shell? And I think our society is groomed all of us perfectly to be just that. There's filters on your camera now that are going to make you look like a 16-year-old girl if you want to, And so all of these things are reinforcing this. You don't have to be you. String of people that just for fun catfish, and they go online and pretend to be somebody that they're not. And I just feel like that's reinforced in society. Like what do they say? You're about to go on a date with somebody and they say, just be yourself. And I always think to myself, that's the worst possible advice you could give somebody. Just be yourself. Like you're going to be yourself at year 5 in marriage.
Yeah, we'll take that to you. Imagine if you, again, this is you, this isn't everyone else, but imagine that if Steven really was Steven, he really was able to be himself. What would that look like, walking that out?
Well, and I would say that depends on which Steven we're talking to on what day. I guess what I mean by that is, like, I'm hearing your question. Let me see if I'm understanding correctly. Is like, what's the worst that could happen if you were just yourself?
Yeah, I guess is what I'm asking. Yes, ultimately.
From my perspective, I think that there's very few people that I feel comfortable just being myself around, which I suppose dovetails beautifully into the topic. Are you enough? I don't think often that I feel like I am. So I definitely personify, and it is selfish in a lot of ways. I mean, if you think about it, it's like one of my favorite people to quote is Zig Ziglar. And he said, well, a salesman without enthusiasm is just another clerk. Well, very few people are naturally enthusiastic. Ergo, they're putting on a show. I mean, so if sales is performance art, then you're being compensated when you put on a show, when you are a showman. But it's no different to me than David Copperfield. It's an illusion. People don't, and I this is how David Copperfield had come up in our previous conversation, is that people don't want to know how the trick is done. Very few people do, I should say. Except once you know how the trick is done, then all the you want to be mystified. You want to be, it's the allure that attracts us. It's if you have mystique, nobody wants full disclosure, in other words. So if you're truly going to be yourself, that's full disclosure. Who really wants that?
Yeah, I think that's a great question to ponder. I wonder just for a moment, if we can, not to get all, I don't know, hippy dippy, theological, whatever you may want to say, introspective, whatever, transcendentalist, whatever it may be. But I'm wondering just for a moment, is there someone in your life that you can say, you know what, here's my junk, here's my garbage, here's me and my real authentic self. Love me or don't, but here I am. Is there anyone like that for you?
So I would say that I, just shooting from the hip here, that I'd probably feel more comfortable with a total stranger in that environment. Somebody that didn't know me, that I could be candid with on that level. It's hard. It boils down to trust, right? So it's like, who do you trust to that extent? Who do you trust to that level? That's a hard nut to crack for me. I've had times in my life where I've been called recklessly optimistic, where I was comfortable. Who was it that said that, the truth will set you free, but first it'll piss you off? Or ignorance is bliss, right? It's like, this is, kind of ties back to the David Copperfield. It's like, we want that.
Yeah, but do you want that? That's what I'm wondering about. Do you want that?
See, my true innermost self is extremely cynical, which is off-putting for most people, which is why I don't really share that with them, because most people don't like that cynical side of me. Myself personally, I'd rather just look at things as they are. Reality has never really been observed by anybody. So I'm still in saying that I'd rather see things as they are. I'm racking my brain right now because I'm trying to think of this. There's an expression where people say that I see you, where it's like somebody who maybe resonates with your frequency. Like you and I have talked about being kindred spirits, and that we've connected on a level, even though we barely knew each other. There's something about our interactions that gravitate to each other. There's an expression, I'm totally just destroying wherever it came from, but it basically says that I see you. Like I see you for you. I appreciate you for you.
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole song, which always makes me almost weep, is, who will love me for me? It's this song by J.J. Heller, which makes me weep every time I hear it, because I hear the pain and the heartache in the people that she's describing in this song. It breaks my heart for people, because, who will love you for you? Not for what you've done or what you hope to become, but who will love you for you. And it's so hard, because I think, again, from what I'm hearing, is that there was this little boy, in your case, that had all this energy and angst and all this heartache and all this challenge. And now your mom's gone, and she was kind of the nurturer of the family, as you said, holding it all together, and now you're left with this grumpy, crotchety old, naval guy, because I know your dad was in the Navy, to kind of hold everybody together and be the nurturer and be the, and that's maybe not his skill set. Maybe they didn't teach him that in the Navy. I don't know. I know they didn't teach my dad that in the Marine Corps, for sure. And now it's just you, and you're like, well, who's gonna love me for me? Who's gonna be there for Steven? And I think that's why you desperately want to be the best dad you can, because, and again, not that your dad was terrible, but you want to make sure your son and your daughter know and love you in a real authentic way.
Like, the only way that I can be a good dad is if I am neutral. And what I mean by that is if I'm not imposing upon him my agenda and my beliefs and my upbringing and all the things that all the colors I was shaded with during, my developing and formative years. I try to really get on his level, and I try to recognize when I don't. And there's definitely moments where I don't. And I can see that. And I can recognize his body language or the way he'll change his tone or what have you. And I'll see that I kind of missed the mark. I know this is getting kind of convoluted from what you were saying, but it reminds me, your question, or maybe it wasn't a question, but what you were saying reminds me of something that Carl Sagan said, with as vast as the universe is, right? We're just this tiny little pale blue dot. Right. And the only thing that makes all of that emptiness and all of that vast expansive space, the only thing that makes any of that bearable is love. And we're all so much more connected than I think we realize. I think that when we recognize that in somebody, we, like you and I have talked about, when we resonate on that same frequency as someone, but I think it's given a little bit of effort, you can find more in common with people than not, And I think a big part of that comes from judgment, maybe not judgment, but compassion. You had said something a moment ago that kind of hit me, is when you were talking about, the inside of Stephen, there's this, child. And it reminds me of something that my dad had shared with me. As I mentioned before, he's kind of a mentor, and he got to a place in his life where he had, for lack of a better word, an existential crisis where, my brother, his son had passed away, his wife is now sick and for all intents and purposes dying. And he had this moment where he was able to remove everything. And he, as he puts it, he chucked it. He just chucked it all. And he realized in that moment that his essence hadn't changed from the time he was like 5 years old, that so much of his life had become a construct of his culture and the things that he had to do, and all of the layers of that society throws on us that says, here's what you should wear and here's what you should do and here's what you should be, and all the expectations. And when he got rid of all of that, he realized that his essence didn't change from the time that he was a kid. And I think that's the person that I'm trying to get in touch with, to your point, is the mystery that who is really the real Stephen. Because to your topic, I don't feel like I'm enough, very rarely. And so I'm constantly, I want to say I'm driven to succeed, right? I'm competitive. I want to achieve. I want to provide. I want to be all of these X, Y, and Z things. But is that driven by something inside myself that tells me I'm not enough, that tells me I'm not good enough. I'm not doing enough. I should be doing more.
Yeah. And I think that's going to be an internal struggle. First off, man, thank you. I know we went down some roads together, and I always value that and appreciate that, man. I just really appreciate you as a human being, and you as a friend. And I don't throw that word around too often because I think probably the best line in one of my favorite movies is, Forrest Gump. He says, Bubba died right there by that river in Vietnam. Bubba was my best friend. And even I know that's not something you can just get down the road. That was my best Forrest Gump impersonation. So there it is. Figured we needed a little lightheartedness after that. So help me with this, because you did at one point in time live in San Francisco, right? I know it's Santa Clara, but I didn't know if you had ventured over to the San Francisco area at all. I thought you had lived there. Maybe I misunderstood that.
Yeah, no, I've lived quite a few places. I've lived Santa Cruz originally, Southern California for a hot minute, mostly couch surfing, and then Washington State, and now the North State of California.
I like the North State of California. That's fun to say. So you've never really been to San Francisco then? This is really going to fall flat then.
I've visited. I've been there. I've been there dozens of times.
Okay.
But it's like I never lived there because I'm not a millionaire or a transient. So.
Or both. Can you be both? I don't know.
Sure.
So here's my question. Did you ever, in your travels to San Francisco, did you ever get to Pac Bell Park, AT&T Park, Oracle Park? It's had like 17 games. Okay. You've seen a game there?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
My first baseball game ever was Giants Padres, 1980. I don't know, 7 or something.
Well, that'd have been at Candlestick, not even at the new one.
That would have been at Candlestick, yeah. And it was, I remember it was freezing.
Oh, yeah. Can't watch a game there and it not be freezing. So I almost missed that about San Francisco. Anyway, I grew up a Giants fan, still am a Giants fan. And so Oracle Park, I know it as Pac Bell. That's when I first saw it. But do you know the seating capacity of Oracle, AT&T, Pac Bell Park? I feel like I got to give all 3 names.
The seating capacity.
Wow. You're not even close.
I can imagine.
It kind of surprised me how small it was, actually. 41,915, according to Google. 41,915. Right. So imagine just for a moment that stadium in all its luster, because it is a pretty cool stadium right on the bay. For those that don't know, the Giants can actually hit balls into the Bay of San Francisco. It's kind of a cool thing. It's set on the water. It's actually a gorgeous park, I think, because it's right now.
Kayakers will hang out there and try to catch balls and stuff.
Right, exactly. It's a big thing. So anyway, so imagine just for a moment being at that stadium, but now instead of being in the stands, you're at home plate. And in this moment, if I handed you a microphone and I said, Steven, you got a chance right now to speak to 41,915 people about life, about sales, maybe to inspire them in some respects. Maybe they're up and coming salespeople for, Fortune 100 company of some sort. Telecommunication company, perhaps. I don't know. We'll just pick that. That seems like a fun company to maybe work for or talk about. So what would you say to those young up-and-comers in this moment?
You got to think about what they're going up against. If we've got to inspire this entire group of people to take up arms, go out and do something, you got to ask them what their purpose is. What fires you up? What is going to drive you to keep going when you want to give up? I would say, I'm tempted to say, just go out there, be legendary, be memorable. Coaches would say, leave it all out on the field, don't hold back.
What would you say though? I mean, those are all great, little phrases, but what would you say? I mean, you've walked those roads. You know it well. How would you inspire this great group of young salespeople per se?
Did not see this question coming, man. I would say, there's going to be a time when things get tough and you need to have something to believe in. So if you're going to believe in anything, make it be yourself. If you got a dream big. Go out there and put a dent in the universe.
Do you think any of those young up-and-coming people would believe you?
Probably not. Why would they? They're young. They're bulletproof. I'm just some old guy. Experience is what you get after you need it.
That's solid. All right, man. Just want to say thanks again. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, of course.
So let's play a game together. Games are fun, right? You like games? All right. So here's my famous North Carolina Cup. It's truly everywhere, as you know. So here we go. Ooh, I was hoping you were going to get this question. Speaking of
I already don't
number
like
6,
it because it's an even number.
Look at that.
You know how weird I am about stuff like that.
I know. I tried to get you an odd one, but I really wanted you to get this one. All right. So you get to have a meal of some sort. Any meal you want. First off, maybe where you're going to go eat. Is there a certain place there that you like to go eat? And then who you're going to take. One person, dead or alive.
Okay.
You get to take them to a meal.
Okay. Got it. So it's sushi. I would say Voltaire.
Help me with that one. I don't know Voltaire.
So I'll give you a quote. On his deathbed, right? When asked to repent and, relinquish, turn his back on Satan and accept Jesus into his heart, he said, now is not the time to be making enemies.
Now I'm gonna have to go look this guy up. That's different. Now is not the time. Yeah,
maybe not that one. Stephen Hawking, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
I like Voltaire though. You could stick with Voltaire. There's no harm in
Carl Sagan. There's a lot of harm in it.
All right, guys and gals, kids and campers alike. It was a great talk, wasn't it? To me, it's always interesting when we ask that question: are you enough? It's so hard, I feel like, on so many levels to answer, and I think Steven gave us a lot of answers to that question. But the question I really want to walk away with, for me at least, and maybe something to challenge you on this next week, is this: who gets the real you? Who gets the deep down, authentic, no filters, no suit, no tie, no polo? Who gets the real you? Now I know for some of you, you think, well, I'm the real me all the time, Neil. What are you talking about? Are you though? Are you really the real you? Because I have a hunch, just a hunch here, that there are very few people that get the real authentic you. And so my challenge to you this week is find just one person that you can sit down with, maybe at a Denny's, Starbucks. It doesn't have to be a coffee shop. It can be a tea shop if they still have those hanging around someplace. But sit down with somebody this week and have a real authentic conversation. Say, listen, here's my backpack. Here's my stuff. I want to trust you with it. And if you do that, if you choose to do that, which I hope you do, let me know how that goes. Because again, I think there's something authentic about doing that. Having that person, like we've talked about in previous episodes, that trustful person, that person that you can be so real and authentic with, and they will love you no matter what. Let that be your challenge this week as we wrap up. And of course, don't forget this. Don't ever forget. Do not forget. Remember, when you walk in other people's shoes, you really do get a different perspective on life. I want to thank you so much for listening, and stay tuned till next week when we walk in other people's shoes.